And then I says, but I'm walking here. Oh, sorry, everybody. I was telling Dan about my New York City vacation I got back from to be a part of this show. So I could be on Take the Black
It's
with you
true.
guys, which we have every week, the only show where we talk about things like sci-fi, fantasy, robots, swords, space lasers, and such. Daniel Roman, how are you over in the actual New York State doing?
I am doing pretty well. It's a gloomy day here. There's been a lot of exciting and some moderate, some maybe a little less exciting news. We're going to talk about all of them. But Dan, how was your voyage to New York? It sounded perilous talking about walking those streets.
Well, no, you just know that when you're in New York City, that there are people, and then you say, I'm walking here. And then that's kind of like a New York
That's true.
hello. It's a
It's a rite
hello,
of
it's a
passage.
goodbye, it's everything. I had a lot of fun.
It's
And I
true.
didn't have to miss any shows. I had a good vacation. Hello, everybody. Hello, Joanne. Hello, Christian. Hello, Martha. Glad you could be here.
Hello.
For what should be a productive, interesting, insightful, and potentially even revolutionary chat. Daniel, what are we talking about
Yes.
today on a new episode of Take the Black Live?
Well, the big thing that we have to talk about, there's no way around it, is this huge news that broke
Not
this
avoiding
week
it.
that HBO is considering making another Game of Thrones spinoff. This one about Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives, Rhaenys and Visenya, and the conquest of Westeros, which is basically like where the calendar starts for Westeros. So it's as far back as the Targaryen rule goes. And they are thinking about making not just a show, but apparently the talks are to make a show and a movie about this, or a movie that could lead into a show.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big news. What do you think about this, Dan? I'm really intrigued.
I think, by the way, some of the comments, Laura asked, are we talking about the new prequel rumors? Yes, we are, Laura. We will absolutely help. She also says Jojo Stanhope Perry. I don't know what that means, but I like the way it rolls off my tongue, as well as Guillermo Javier Martino Sisto. I'm sure you're talking about Laura, but these names are terrific. We are talking about rumors of a new Game of Thrones prequel, Aegon the Conqueror. And I mean, the first thing
Yes.
I want to say is that they're rumors. And they're not even really new rumors. I feel like this got into the news bloodstream, and folk were all writing about new Game of Thrones coming. Like they were working on Game of Thrones prequel ideas for a long time, for literally years. And Aegon the Conqueror
Yeah.
was, yeah, it was. It was one of them, like one of the original pitches involved Aegon and his
Yes, it
sister wives,
was.
Rhaenys and Visenya, and the original pitch had Aegon as like a drunken lout, like a William the Conqueror type, who's just going to drunkenly get on Balerion, spit fire, and effortlessly win over things. That could be fun.
So
Um,
glad they didn't do that.
what? No, I hope they do. I hope that's what they're doing.
Oh God.
Um, I guess what I want to underline, like it's, I'm not being sarcastic. Yeah, absolutely do that. Um, I want to underline that this is a rumor that's probably rooted in truth, but the fact that we're hearing about it doesn't mean that the Aegon the Conqueror spinoff is any more likely to be made than any of the other spinoffs we've heard about. You know, like the animated
Yes.
shows or Duncan Egg or Jon Snow sequel show. It my bet is it just got this spike because someone found some new details about it. But while
Yes.
I am certain it probably has been talked about, I have no doubt it has. I don't know if I'm convinced that it's being talked about in a way that suggests it's going to be made or has a better chance to be made than some of the other things that have also been talked about.
Yeah, that I mean that resonates to me. I imagine that you're probably pretty on point there because like you said, Aegon the Conqueror, like that's one of the most, George R. R. Martin has talked about him in basically every single book he's written, at least a little bit. Um,
Yeah, he comes
it
up.
makes sense to me they would think about this, and like you said, they did entertain a pitch for an Egon show during the original round of pitching Game of Thrones spinoffs. It's a no-brainer to at least consider it. It seems
Yeah,
like you
it's a good
said, there's
story.
some new information. Yeah, they're maybe considering a new angle to this because of House
Hmm.
of the Dragon success. But like
Mhm.
you said, there is no guarantee this thing is any more likely to get made than any of the other spin-offs. So it's cool to get, we get excited about any new Game of Thrones news, but definitely don't pin any hopes on this one until we hear anything, which will likely be a while.
Yeah,
Um,
like don't pin your hopes on it, but do subscribe to our YouTube and Facebook channels for more information.
yes.
Um, I will say I don't like the idea of a movie and a show. I remember the
Why not?
reports about remember this? I'll tell you.
Hmm.
Remember the reports about Tiff Benioff and Dan Weiss, the Game of Thrones showrunners, going to HBO as the show was wrapping up and saying like we want to finish the series as a couple of movies, and the HBO
Yes.
people saying basically no, it's a TV show. Which I think
Hmm.
makes sense. I think why would you has there ever been I guess Firefly was like a TV show that finished the movie. That's a little different though. Um
That was a unique situation.
I l- I would like the idea of an Aegon movie. I think that's fun. I think like because
Yeah.
the story isn't as complicated as House of the Dragon. This is Aegon the Conqueror and Sister
Mhm.
Wives conquering Westeros 30 years before the events of Game of Thrones, basically rolling over everybody, forging the Iron Throne. It's a good story. Um, I could see like a season of a TV show. I liked the suggestion that it would be like season 5 of House of the Dragon, basically. That they get done with the
Yes.
Dance of the Dragons, and then, well, some other Targaryens did some crazy stuff. Let's talk about them for a while. I don't really like the idea of it being a movie and show together. I don't like crossing the streams like that. That reeks of that corporate thing where folk are like, we want to, it's what it mean multimedia, and we want folk to buy the movie and then watch the show, and then well, and the story will continue in the video game, and then and the trading card deck, and that's where I got the next bit of information. I don't like any of that.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a little more discreet. I'd be down with like a movie though, an Aegon movie, sure, rock on,
Yeah.
or even
So
a show.
yeah, I have some thoughts about the movie thing. I actually don't hate it as much as I expected to. Because I do agree with you about the corporate multimedia thing. It makes me think of DC being like, we're gonna have video games are now a part of the DCU, and it's like, okay,
Oh
sure.
yeah, right here, DC,
We
between the lines.
yeah, we believe you. But so with your example with Benioff and Weiss, I thought about that too when this announcement happened. And part of the logic there, part of the reasoning they shot down Benioff and Weiss and George R. R. Martin, because he wanted this too, the whole movie thing,
I have no doubt.
was yeah, it was because they had gotten people invested in an HBO series, and the HBO brass basically came back and said, it's unfair to our viewers to say you've subscribed for 8 years. Now we need you to go to a movie theater to see how this thing ends.
Integrity.
I do integrity. That's HBO. Maybe, maybe not. But so the reason I think the Egon thing could work is
Mhm.
because HBO is now owned by Warner Brothers. They're already crossing those streams in terms of theatrical releases going to HBO Max. So
True.
I feel like
Well,
if they did a movie to kick it off, as something that it could even release simultaneously on HBO Max and in theaters, just to give the super fans options for how to see it, because people went
mhm.
to see Game of Thrones episodes in theaters. I think some people would turn out to
Not
see
many.
huge dragon battles in the movie theaters. Um,
Sure.
if they did it that way, so that it's not like we're trying to hook you in multiple ways, but like here's basically a 2.5 hour special to kick off this series, and it covered. So I feel like there are 2 years before Aegon technically takes over ruling, which is like the bloodiest part of the conquest, and then the
Mhm.
calendar really starts after those 2 years. So I wonder if they could do a special to
Ooh.
like capture his like landfall on Westeros basically, and then run the series from there.
It could
Um,
be a
but I
special,
don't know.
sure. I can get down with that.
Yeah,
Just I I guess things are bleeding together a bit more nowadays. I mean, I remember the old
Last
Battlestar
Kingdom.
Galactica thing was doing the special. Oh, The Last
Yeah.
Kingdom is doing that. It's
And
available on
Stranger Things
Netflix, at
basically did
least.
too.
That's
Yeah,
true.
totally.
More realistic.
I think
As long as it's
I
available
think if
on
they do a
HBO
movie, it
Max,
has to be
or it
available
shows
on
on
that.
HBO, yeah. Like put it in theaters
Yeah, totally.
too. Maybe that. Someone said about Noir Genti that Aegon was controlled, blah 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 blah. There's plenty of story there explaining why he finally did it and why Westeros was so unprepared. Oh, Noir, I think there's definitely story there to be told. I just don't
Yeah.
want them. I don't know. I don't like the idea of them splitting it up over multiple mediums. And I don't like the idea of them doing too much at all. Like, look, at this point, we're deep into the Marvel and Star Wars experiments where they're kind of hitting us with tons of stuff all the time, nonstop. And honestly, I think there have been some real drawbacks to that. And now more than ever, I think it's incumbent on HBO to not oversaturate the Game of Thrones band. They've done a great job. They put it House of the Dragon after the Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
There's been nothing else. I'm sure we'll get something else, but careful. Be careful. I don't want the show to be I would like hold it till after the House of Dragon is done. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
And then
Totally
just
agree.
be very careful about what you put out and when and how much. Don't like just blast with too much. But if it does get made, Daniel, who should play Aegon the Conqueror? And should it not be Henry
Um
Cavill like the world wants?
yeah, I mean a lot of people are saying it should be Henry Cavill. Kind
Of
of
course they
the
are.
the prevailing other arguments to that is that Henry Cavill, I've seen a lot of people debate whether Aegon is actually this stoic masculine warrior that he's kind of portrayed as in Fire and Blood, or whether that's like
Boring.
propagandized and he should be, a little meeker, basically. I feel like they need someone who can
Drunk.
capture, yeah, or a drunk. I feel so. Henry Cavill is one of the obvious people that everyone is talking about. Another one I've seen is Aaron Taylor Johnson,
Mhm.
who was in Bullet Train. He was in Kick Ass, but that's a bad example because he was a kid. I think he could do a decent job too. Um, there are others like Charlie Hunnam is a name I've seen thrown around. He's from Sons of Anarchy. He's probably a little too old, which is a shame because like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, he would have been perfect for it.
Sure.
Um, Alexander Skarsgård. Laura, I'm working on a Dreamcast about who would play Aegon right now, and I did think about Alexander Skarsgård. He's in his mid 40s though. So that does feel like a little bit of a stretch to me because Aegon's 25 at the start of the conquest. So it's one of the things that's fascinating about this to me is that depending on how long they have Aegon's story run, the end of the wars, basically, the end of the conquering, the end of the campaigning is he's closer to 40 by that point, which is the end of the first
So,
Dornish War. So they could span a pretty decent length of time. Um, but I agree with you. I kind of hope this is like the next era of House of the Dragon rather than its own separate spin-off. Natalie says Pedro Pascal.
oh,
Um,
sure. Why
Ert-
not? Doing everything.
yeah, I want to shout out. So Urtak Altanos is in the YouTube chat. Hey Urtak, thanks for tuning in. Makes awesome fan art for Song of Ice and Fire as well as official art.
Oh,
If you
great.
haven't seen it, you probably have seen it and just don't know. He said maybe the film will feature the start of everything, like maybe take place at the Doom of Valyria rather than taking place between the Conquest and House of the Dragon. That it feels like wishful thinking, but a Doom of Valyria movie
Ooh.
could be really,
Or a
really
show.
cool.
Maybe,
Or a
yeah,
show.
because I mean, we don't know what we're going to get because there is so much history. Yeah, I mean, and they thought about a Valyria show. They thought about an Aegon show. They might
Yeah.
still give us that stuff. Now the House Dragon is big. I think some of that would be better as movies. Some of that would be better as shows. Yeah, a Doom of Valyria show, a movie, and then a Conqueror show. That could be really cool. There's a lot to go there.
Yeah.
I I am kind of getting excited thinking about the possibilities of having all that on screen. I just want it to be slow and
Yeah.
steady, and I'm sure they'll do a good job. In terms of acting, honestly, somewhat you were saying about like that there's like this theory that it was propaganda that Aegon was like a big alpha masculine warrior
Yes.
guy. That's so much more
Yes.
interesting. Like everyone out there who's suggesting, I love you, you're all great. Like Henry Cavill, Alexander Skarsgård, isn't all a little cliche? Just like a little, yeah, like this the big 6 foot tall strapping warrior dude. I'm not suggesting this as a serious suggestion, but someone a little left of like James Corden or something, like someone who you would not think
Wait,
as
James,
like
who is that? I'm thinking of the late night host, and that can't be right.
that's him, the late night host. He's an actor. Or like Jonah Hill.
Okay.
Like Jonah Hill is
Jonah
Aegon the
Hill is
Conqueror.
Aegon the
Seth Rogen, something like that.
I mean,
I'm not saying cast that. I'm saying take a different tack with it. Like if I were making this show, I would not make the show people wanted, where it's like he's just
yeah,
a big like I will conquer 7 kingdoms because I am this kind of guy. Like make something surprising. He was not who we thought he was. He's somehow different. I love the pitch
yes.
of he's like kind of a drunk who can't get it together, and go with something like that. Do something unique. I think it'd be a little boring if they went with a straightforward thing, but that's just me.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say?
Yeah,
Drunk. Wait, one. Never mind. Go on. I lost my train of thought.
okay.
Danny McBride. Yeah, that's the one.
Oh God, Danny McBride takes over Westeros. Yeah.
Watch that.
So I saw on Reddit, I saw this one really, really great point about Aegon, which is that so Aegon's 2 kids that follow after him are Aenys Targaryen and Maegor the Cruel, and they kind of embody like opposite sides of Aegon.
Mhm.
Aenys is this really kind of impotent leader. He's very intelligent but kind of meek. Maegor is obviously the worst and kind of a psychopath and a warrior. So I do feel like if they are going to get someone as hilarious as Jonah Hill is, as alpha as someone like Henry Cavill is, I do think they need someone that kind of isn't just a total bro. Like it has to have a little bit of,
some kind of
almost
twist on it.
Yeah, almost, I don't want to say androgynous Targaryen quality like Viserys from the original GOT,
sure.
Dany's brother, or Daemon. But I feel like they need something like that. Like a similar character who's kind of popping to mind right now is like the guy who played James Holden on The Expanse. Like someone who can pull off getting the masculine bros to follow him while still being like a thoughtful, intelligent person. I feel like they need
someone.
That for Aegon.
Someone below said they'll give it to Timothy Shamalama Ding Dong, and I mean that's another like cliche choice, which they probably would do. And again, we're not sure they even do this, but it is a cool. The other thing I wanted to bring up was that this particular show is a little more interesting now because from the books and the original show, we know about Aegon that he conquered the 7 kingdoms, and in House of the Dragon, they added the wrinkle that he did it because he had this vision of the White Walkers basically, and did it in order to unite the kingdom. So obviously that would be part of it, and that's a cool wrinkle they added in that I like a lot, and I'm sure they would be able to work that in, and I'd be interested to see it. And I would just want to, if they just have to be careful what they choose to make, and that they're making it for a good reason, not just to keep it going. My personal opinion, if I got to choose, I'd say don't make it at all. Make Dunkin' Egg. That's what I would go with, because that's just a different mood, and they can still do it. It'd still be the world, and then do that, and then maybe by the time we're done with that, we'll be ready for another Aegon the Conqueror type show. But if they do it, I hope they do it with the appropriate amount of respect for the source material on the one hand, and an adventurous spirit on the other. That combination can go wrong, but not if you do it correctly.
Yeah. Nicole's got a good one too. Jamie Campbell Bower, who played Vecna.
Ooh.
I mean, he's kind of exactly what I'm talking about in terms of you could see him being scary or a good warrior, but he's also not, the muscle bound brute. Because Noir has a great point too, that the problem with casting Aegon as not a badass is that you have to explain all the personal wins and hand to hand things on record, like duels and stuff like that. So he can't be, a mindless brute. He also can't be totally incompetent either. So it's a tricky thing.
I like the
But yeah,
drunk
I
angle.
agree.
I think that's fun. Like,
too.
give some kind of under thing. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If we ever do come to it. Any other thoughts about Aegon? Good, bad, gonna happen, not gonna happen before we move on?
I think my main thought is I really hope that you're right. And as exciting as it is to talk about this right now, I hope we don't hear anything else about it until after House of the Dragon. I just, HBO has had they have played their cards so smart with how they did House of the Dragon to not dilute the well.
They did a good job.
And they really did. And I just want them to keep doing that, even though it seems like there's a lot of pressure to expand franchises right now from their boss, which is
just they gotta hold out. Next. It's good corporate attention. Robert Harris suggests Finnick from Hunger Games. I think his name is Sam Claflin. Daniel, for you, possibly inspiration. Yes. And then, of course, JP says the actor people want for Daemon from Vikings. Travis Fimmel, that's that guy, right?
Yeah, he's a little old for that. I would love Travis Fimmel in that role, but he's in his like mid to late 40s, I think. So it'd be a hard sell for him as a 25-year-old. Early era Travis Fimmel, I would have loved in that part, though.
Fair enough. All right, Daniel, what else is on the agenda for today's episode of Take the Black?
Yeah, so speaking of spin-offs and reboots and diluting the well and HBO, so the other big HBO news that broke this week is that Warner Brothers Discovery is close to striking a deal to make a Harry Potter TV show. This is a reboot. It's based on the original books with one season per book. And because J.K. Rowling is toxic as hell and no one wants to be attached to her right now, they were very careful to say J.K. Rowling is an advisor on the show. She's involved, but she's not running it. Because, everything she touches is controversy right now.
Sure.
So, yeah. How do you feel about this, Dan? How do you feel about this, viewers? I'm unsure.
I'm shocked it took this long to happen. I really am. I thought they would have had a Harry Potter TV show in the pipeline not that long ago. I know the movies wrapped up like not that long ago. Really, well, was it 10 years ago that how those two came out? Something like that. Okay, so about 12 years.
Just over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought for a while that Harry Potter would probably get a TV show because it seemed like after Game of Thrones, the trend was these big, splashy, epic TV shows. And someone would make it, and they would have 7 seasons, and it would be like a just dependable, folk would watch it, long-lasting, decade-long show. And honestly, I didn't think that was a terrible idea because they made Fantastic Beasts and like there were 4 people who liked it and a lot of people who didn't, and then others who were completely like kind of like whatever. I was in the camp of like this is very meh. I don't really need it. Yeah. And then J.K. Rowling declared herself the captain of the anti-trans squad of the world, and that threw a wrench into things. My opinion on that is, I want to say I am against J.K. Rowling's views. I do think her being a public figure and espousing this bigoted stuff is like a terrible thing to happen to pop culture and to trans people. My other thought is, no matter what, they're gonna make more Harry Potter stuff. It's like me objecting isn't going to stop them. So my thought was always that if you're going to make it and you might as well just make it and put in things that are a little more progressive, changing things around a little bit. It'd be funny if like they made Harry Potter, but every single character was trans. That'd be pretty funny. I'd like that. Honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to a Harry
What
Potter
would be
reboot, though. I really wouldn't. I thought it was
okay?
coming for a while. I don't know if I'd watch it. I still think the story is good. I still enjoy the original books. I still like the tale
Yeah,
being told. There's been a lot of discourse around it lately, I think, in the wake of the J.K. Rowling stuff, people reevaluating it.
sure.
I think the bones are good. I do. I think it would make a good
Yeah,
show.
I agree
I think
with
it
that.
would. I think it makes sense. And I think they're gonna do it no matter what. So they might as if they're gonna do it, they might as well do it well. And I'm just surprised it took this long to happen. I really thought it would be sooner than this.
See, I am in the opposite camp here. I agree with you that I still think the books are, for the most part, they were never my favorite books, but I don't think they're, bad by any stretch. What Leo is saying over on the YouTube, that the TV show will probably dive into things that were cut from the movies, like Harry's date with
Probably.
Cho in the books. Yeah, that's something that I'm pretty sure the article that broke this story said that was part of the idea. At the
Sure.
same time, I feel like there wasn't enough cut for, if the examples we've got are things like Harry's date with Cho, is that
The
enough to
house elf
justify
arc.
an entire reboot? I feel like they got most of the
They
big
did.
events in the movies, for the most part. Some got
They
really short
completely did.
shrift, like
And
Goblet of
now,
Fire.
TV
I think they
version.
dropped the ball on. Yeah, so I really hate this, to be honest. I think you're right that it's inevitable because that's Harry Potter. It's no longer a thing that makes compelling news stories. It's just, how can we recycle this thing that everyone loves? And the book industry's been doing it for years with like little companion things for Harry Potter. Let's release
True, true,
the
true.
play script and market it as the eighth book, and people will find out when they buy it that it's not a book. So there are all sorts of things like this where it's just obviously a cash grab, and the movies that were made are hardly more than a decade old. And I just feel like HBO, it's backwards thinking. That's what bugs me about it. It's, let's reboot this proven thing instead of like, let's develop any of the hundreds probably of other compelling choices they could choose to launch new fantasy and science fiction series.
Oh yeah, like
Um,
I would much rather them choose a whole new book series to adapt than do this. They're
yeah,
not gonna. Um,
exactly. Yeah, they're
with
not
Harry
gonna. It's
Potter
frustrating though.
specifically, I don't like. Okay, so let me ask you this: like, how long, how much time needs to pass after? And this is for you out there watching too. I want to know your opinions on this. After like
Yeah,
an iconic series of movies or TV show happens, how much time needs to pass before it's appropriate to do like a proper reboot? And the answer can be infinity because you just don't do one. But like Lord of the
sure.
Rings is a movie series that, came out 20 years ago now-ish. And that's been back in the news lately because they're thinking of, well, we're not really sure if they're making new Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings movies. Amazon did like a Lord of the Rings adjacent second age show that is like all of fine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is there ever a time when it's appropriate to just do the same story again? And this would be a little because the Harry Potter thing, it was movies on a TV show, but it was also like 8 movies, which is basically like just 8 long ass episodes. Um, is
Yeah.
there a is it possible for enough time to pass for a proper, we're just gonna do it again to be acceptable? They've made Little Women like
Yeah.
5 times the movies, just FYI.
You know what? I think Nicole is on point with this. She says a full generation. I
Hmm.
don't know how you measure that, but so the one that comes immediately to mind for me that I think is like a gold standard for this is
Right.
Battlestar Galactica.
Okay,
So the
y'all.
reboot, 2004 reboot of a, I believe, 70s show. So that's around 30-ish years. Reimagined a lot of things. Starbuck was a dude in the original Battlestar. Starbuck
I
is
didn't
not
know
a
that.
dude in the reboot. Um, so they changed a lot of
He does the
stuff. They
cough.
made their own story, and it's just an excellent, excellent show. I feel like 10 years is way too soon. And Lord of the Rings, I'm kind of in that opinion with too, that I feel like it's almost too soon to just totally reboot it. But part of the
It does
reason for
feel
that
too
is that,
soon.
yeah, those
Mhm.
movies have aged really well. you know, watching them, they still look better than the Hobbit movies, honestly, which are newer. So there, I feel like, yeah, it's a slippery thing, but I think 25 to 30 years is a lot more reasonable for something like that than 12. Because at that point, it's like parents are still introducing their kids to these movies that came out when their kids were babies and they're now 10-year-olds and can
Yeah.
watch them.
Like
Um,
some great answers, by the way. Like Martha points out that Interview with the Vampire is being redone right now, and so far it's
yes,
been a
that's a great
pretty
one.
big hit. Like I really liked the show a lot. Perry Mason got brought up during the HBO show. Very, very nice show. And I mean, that show was back in like the 50s to 60s, and it's a really new take
Yeah.
on it. It would
Yeah.
be, and then my mind
Quantum
goes to
Leap
like,
too.
Quantum Leap, right? I think like this isn't really sci-fi fans, but like Little Women, like Little Women's been adapted like it is like at least 4 movies. There's an anime series, a
Yeah.
lot of Little Women stuff out there. And the most recent one still found a new way in. The Harry Potter movies are recent enough and modern enough. It's not like Perry Mason, where like if you make it into the
Mhm.
2020s, it's just gonna be different from the 1960s version. There's too much has
Sure.
changed in terms of how things are made. Like,
Yeah.
but with
Which
Harry
was the case
Potter,
with Battlestar too.
yeah, from the 70s to like the 2000s or whatever, that makes sense. Harry Potter, yeah, maybe you're right. Like, not enough time has passed for there to be of necessity a new way to interpret it. I think TV would be different, but maybe not different enough. I don't know. For some reason, I don't object to it that much, which I thought I
Yeah,
would
I'm
more, but I don't.
surprised.
Maybe because the movies did, because there is a lot you could include. I don't know. I don't object to the idea that much, and perhaps just because I've expected it for so long. Now that finally word's coming down
Mhm.
from it, I've already resigned myself. I'm not sure. I don't know what's going on with me.
That's
Reboots
fair.
can be done
So
though.
let me
I think that we did have a conclusion here that reboots can. Oh, Dune, another good example from Neo Gente. Yeah, they rebooted Dune. Although the first Dune like was
that's
controversial
the
at
same.
best.
Yeah.
Hmm?
That's still like a 30-year difference
Yeah, that's
though
a while.
from David Lynch's Dune to the new one.
So there is a
Granted,
time
I agree
period
with you. If
though.
they botch it, yeah.
It
You
wasn't an
know, if you
instance
want to
of
see
like
this,
it's never appropriate. It can be appropriate.
yeah, I think it can be appropriate. I think it's all about knowing when it's appropriate. You know, look at Hellboy. Hellboy is my go-to example for this gone
Do I have
wrong.
to?
Guillermo, no, you don't. Guillermo del Toro did 2 fantastic Hellboy movies, and now they've
Mhm.
tried to reboot it. They did it once and failed, and they're doing it again. And it's like, at a certain point, you need to let things lie long enough so that you can come back at it with a fresh audience, I think. Um, so
Sure,
one
I
thing
agree
that's
with you.
curious to me about cool. One thing that's
Just
curious to me about the Harry Potter thing.
uh-huh.
Oh, sorry. I keep
No, I just want
interrupting
to say
you.
just
It's the
premise to
delay.
you. I don't object to the Harry Potter thing, but you've convinced me. I don't think it's a good idea.
That was my whole goal for this
Okay,
show.
go
Um,
on.
but so one of the things I find intriguing about this is thinking about HBO's brand, because I remember hearing a little while back that they were like kind of gutting some of their kids programming and their animated
Yeah,
programming.
right.
Um,
Sesame Street.
and so and yeah, and Aegon the Conqueror show, I'm like, yeah, of course, that's HBO brand. It is an adult show. It is, you know, warring political families, all this sort of stuff. There will be sex and violence and all those things that HBO likes to have in its shows.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Potter is not any of those things. And
No, it
that's
is
part of
not.
what makes me kind of side eye this, being like, this isn't like a, it's one thing for HBO to do that with movies, but for a show, I'm like, this is a teen show, and that's not really something you do a whole lot of HBO that I'm aware of. People out there watching, correct me if I'm wrong. Um, and the one I'm just gonna say, I will never understand why they haven't picked up the Greenbone Saga, Jade City by Fonda Lee. It is just,
Rep
it
it.
is fantasy crime families. It is just their brand in a series. I don't understand why they're doing teen shows like Harry Potter and not that. That's my rant. Thank you.
I mean, you don't understand why they would go for Harry, but like I can offer you one
Sure.
explanation. the
Sure.
Greenbone saga, as good as excellent as it may be, and as good as a TV show as I'm sure it would make, is not a tenth as well known as Harry Potter, and they will have a built-in audience for
Of
Harry Potter.
course.
I mean, Harry Potter is the kind of series that's big enough that even if they
Mhm.
don't have a foothold in kind of teen school age dramas, a Harry Potter show makes them close to a leader in it. Like they can have a whole new market
Yeah,
open up for them. Um,
you are
but again,
right. Totally.
I think we agree that we would much rather they go for original
Yeah.
stuff, and that with thanks to all the commenters, you guys are great today. Jesus, man, you're really killing it.
Yes. Thank you for
Yeah,
coming to hang.
it's too soon. It's too soon. And you know what? Again, maybe it won't happen. It is possible that it won't actually come to anything. But
Yeah.
we will see.
Yeah. It seems like they really
As
wanted
Noir
to.
says, it's high time we have some sex and violence in Harry Potter, though. They could try that if they wanted to update it and not make it the same thing. It's like Harry Potter now with cursing and blood.
Harry
But I
Potter
doubt it.
meets Euphoria.
Yeah, magic drugs.
uh yeah, the whole new demographic of subscribers thing that Jay Patel's saying that you were talking about, that they basically would become a leader in that type of programming just with Harry Potter. That's a fair point. And my idealistic brain wants to rail against that, because on the one hand, one of the things that has always made HBO stand out from a lot of its competitors has seemingly been really knowing its brand and the types of shows it wants to make
Sure.
and pushing those kinds of boundaries. And this feels like a step backwards from that. It's, here's this well-known thing we happen to have the rights of. Let's make that too. And it'll, like you said, it feels like a business-minded decision, not even
Oh
remotely a
yeah.
creative one. And that's what
I
concerns
mean,
me about it.
it's also true that it's not HBO, it's HBO Max, which is not really the same thing. Like,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
yeah, it's HBO Max. By the time that the show comes out, HBO Max will be merged with Discovery, and you know that they're talking about just calling it Max, just removing the HBO from
Yes.
there. So,
Yes.
which part of me thought was a really dumb idea because HBO is like the thing that attracts folk to it. On the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a good idea because it wouldn't dilute the HBO brand so much to have what I'm sure will be some, I don't know, less sterling quality shows on Max than there are on just HBO
Yeah.
proper or different
I think
sorts
it
of shows.
dilutes. Yeah, I think I never thought of it from that angle. Are they protecting HBO? Maybe a little bit. I
Yeah,
do
maybe.
think that's another decision where I'm like, man, HBO Max is one of the very, very few streaming services that managed to survive the streaming wars and really carve out a spot for it. And this is just a weird decision to rebrand it like this at this point, but we'll see how it goes. Um,
Max. Yeah.
Laura, yeah, Laura's got a good question about the Snow sequel. Can
Mhm.
you mention if the Snow sequel is looking not as promising because Kit Harington is doing Industry, which is also an HBO series? Apparently, Tech Mogul is a new Kit Harington typecast. He's playing that in
Yes.
Extrapolations.
Yes, he
He's playing
is.
that in Industry.
That's his new
I
thing.
believe in season 3 of Industry. Um,
3, yeah.
I don't think this would be a huge conflict because the Jon Snow series hasn't even been greenlit yet. So it doesn't, I feel like there would probably be enough time. If a Jon Snow series doesn't go up till after House of the Dragon anyway, that's years from now. He's got to keep
I mean,
working.
yeah. If
What do you
Emilia
think?
Clarke can fight the Terminator while she's playing Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones, Kit Harington can join a season of one show and then do this. Also, it could be a good thing because it means the relationship with HBO is still good. That they're keeping him around.
Yes,
They're keeping him in the mix.
totally.
So opposite. I think it's fine. I'm sorry about extrapolations, Robert. That's being
Yes.
bad. Yeah, it didn't really make many
Oh, that's too
waves, did
bad.
it? Okay, let's move on because
Nah,
we are running our mouths in a fun time.
got a lot to talk about.
And thanks, guys. You
Yes.
guys have been great. I really appreciate all the comments. Daniel,
Yeah,
you
here.
watched a movie film recently.
Oh
You
yeah,
watched
I
the
did.
new Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves, which is getting really good
I
press.
did.
What'd you think?
Yes. I think it deserves the really good press, to be
Oh,
honest.
delightful.
Um, yeah, delightful is the right word, honestly. So I went into this thing not knowing what to expect. I saw it yesterday. I loved it. It is just a
Ah,
fun fantasy romp. It doesn't make any pretensions at being anything crazy or more than that. It's just set in the Dungeons and Dragons world. It uses a lot of the conventions, but as with any good Dungeons and Dragons campaign, it's a made up story about this group of adventurers going on an adventure.
it's not based in
And
real life.
it's not based in real life, but at the same time, it really struck that perfect balance for me between like adventure, action, and humor that I think like the very best movies of this type do. Like the
Sure.
example that comes to mind is The Mummy. That's one of my favorite
Oh,
movies. So
right,
this
right,
is
right.
I praise. But that balance of humor at like and a crazy adventure with creatures and effects and action sequences, it was great. I would recommend this to any fantasy fan, or you could go see it with your kids. It's really accessible.
Totally.
So I loved it. And I'm not a long-term Dungeons and Dragons nerd. Like I enjoy it, but I've only played like maybe a handful of times in my life. So it's
It's
very
doing
accessible
well.
whether you are familiar or not.
I mean, Julie wants to see it, and she's not a gamer. It seems like it is actually catching on with people who you wouldn't think would be into, actually playing D&D, which is great.
Yeah,
I remember the old Dungeons and Dragons movie, which was a a terrible
less
camp
great.
fest. Well, no, I
Yeah.
mean, it was like equally great, just not on purpose. I'm glad it's doing well. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I was pleasantly surprised. I won't lie. I teared up a little bit at the end,
Oh.
which I did not expect because there was a surprisingly deep twist late in the movie when the movie hadn't really given you hints that it was capable of that, and then it was like,
Hmm.
here you go. Think about this. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and like we've said, if you are not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, it basically explains everything you need to know. It's just a fun fantasy film with a lot of the sorts of conventions we're all used to seeing by now, like elves and shapeshifters and magic, paladins with magic swords, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely recommend it.
Sweet. Probably see. I think I'll see the Mario movie this weekend with my nephew. I want to
Ooh,
see it, but I
nice.
don't want to um admit that I want to see it, so I'm just going to escort my nephew to it and just pretend that that's the reason I'm taking him.
Nice. That's a
Watching
respectable move.
anything. I think so. Um, anything else you're watching, Daniel, or anybody else out there? What are you guys watching nowadays?
Well,
Movies, TV, anything?
I just rambled a bunch. Can I toss it back to you? Have you watched anything fun in the past week?
Not particularly. I've been busy. I was in New York City. Yeah, I went to some
Oh, that's
Broadway
fair.
shows, taking in culture. That's what I was doing. I've behind
Nice.
a bit on my watching. Succession is the main thing that I've been catching up on, and Ted Lasso are the two things that I've been made some time for. Um, both of them great.
Excellent.
Both of them in their final seasons. Solid stuff. Enjoying them both. But how about you, Daniel?
I heard the latest Succession was really good.
What's juicy?
So
They're two for
I,
two so far.
I
Um, lo-
the
I like
Roys.
that show is again, like, it doesn't really tell anything like a story that you haven't seen before. It's family drama. It's basically, I mean, this is so cliche. It's Game of Thrones in modern times, where it's
Yeah.
ridiculously rich people fighting amongst each other, basically. But the way it makes characters who, again, nothing's new. The characters are all sort of reprehensible. Um,
Yes.
they're all absorbed in
So
themselves,
reprehensible.
but I guess you just sort of account for their own mile high biases and blinders, and still find ways to sympathize with some of them anyway, even though,
Yeah.
like, they could never have been any better than this, is sort of the message that I get from the show. Like, they were doomed from the
Yeah.
start. Although then that gets into like poor little rich people narratives. I don't really approve of those. It's a good show, and I want to see who is the successor at the end of it. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. Cool. So I actually did start Succession this week or weekend. I watched the
Nice.
first season and a half, so I am trying to cruise through and catch up. And yeah, you're totally on point. They really, I think they do a good job of not making it like poor little rich kids narrative, because they basically are just like, here are people who grew up being rich and that really messed them up, but they're still they're still doing awful things. And I think it does a good job of reminding you of both of those things.
Sure.
That for kind of like for every good thing they do, there is an equivalent awful thing that will happen like an episode later. So I've been really enjoying it. So Succession is my big one I've been watching. I also watched the latest episode of The Mandalorian. And I'm
Like
current with that.
today's.
I have seen today's, yes.
Well, I saw it last time.
So the last one I loved. Today's really liked parts of it, and there are other things about it I did not love. I think so. Episode 5 really impressed me, both for just how good it was, how well written it was, how good the action scenes looked.
Tremendous.
And then this week's episode, it still had some of that, but they also leaned really hard on guest cameos. Too hard, I think.
I did hear about some of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they prioritized
Jack Black,
the
Aegon the
guest
Conqueror.
cameos. Yeah, I'd watch it. He'd shout a mighty high note from his mighty PC. Jack Black is always great. I really, Lizzo is in it too, and I love Lizzo. Didn't really like her in the show very much though.
Kind of like why?
It felt like a celebrity guest cameo more than it. Yeah, that's what it felt like to me. So there were things about it that I did not enjoy. Some of the effects looked wonky this week, which is weird because last week looked so good. So The Mandalorian has had, I feel like, a consistent problem at this point with shooting itself in the foot with some of its choices. I know we've complained a lot about the Book of Boba Fett too, being like a secret Mando show, like because he comes in and takes over a few episodes. And it's almost kind of ironic to me because at this point, this season of The Mandalorian is really mainly about Bo-Katan Kryze, who's played by Katie Sackhoff. She's fantastic. I love that Katie Sackhoff is a lead on the show this time.
That's cool.
It reminded me of Book of Boba Fett, because it is like, here's another show where you're saying it's a show about this character and then saying, no, actually, it's going to be about this other one. And I just don't know why that baffles me a little bit, even though I love Katie Sackhoff. I would not want her to be in it less. It just feels like a weird
Mando
choice.
And Baby Yoda are there this time, and like they're always around. I feel like perhaps they're trying to expand it. Someone said a good comment. I think it was Jay. Looks great. Mandalorian this season. Story a huge step down from previous seasons and just bad IMO. There definitely is a drop in enthusiasm around the show. I think because of Boba Fett. I think because of what you're saying, that it's just, it feels like they want this to be a show that will last forever / a long time. And instead of thinking about like, okay, what is the next step in Din Djarin and Baby Yoda's journey, and how does that lead to the end that we will get to? They're expanding the canvas in a big way, which can work. Game of Thrones did that, and it worked really well.
Sure.
But I'm not sure they've run into mine, and it feels like that. I'm enjoying it, but I've downgraded Mandalorian in my watching to what I do for Succession, which is like I watch the episode, I sit there, and that's what I'm doing with my time. To Mandalorian now, something I watch while I fold laundry and do dishes and answer emails.
Yeah,
that's what I've kind of
that's fair.
Knocked it down to. I'm still watching.
I think that's fair. Cool. I think it hasn't, it's not at a point where it's lost me at all. And again, I really enjoyed last week's episode. But yeah, I agree with that general consensus though. It is no longer as sharp and focused as it was, which is ironic because this season has a more
It
focused
does.
story. Like it is about a thing more than the first
Yeah,
season
it
was,
is.
which was
That's
more
true.
of an episode of the week type thing. And I actually don't know if that works for The Mandalorian as well. I think
Yeah.
it's strongest when it does the episode of the week thing instead
It's
of
kind
a
of weird that it,
overarching story about rulers and stuff.
right. It's kind of weird that it shifted gears like that. Like if you
I agree.
want it came in as this serialized thing and it was really interesting that way. And then it's kind of become more like, a post Game of Thrones show where
Yes.
it's it's more like one long movie, that kind of thing. And we have things like that already. So it's just not as enticing as it used to be. And I agree with the more
I
that
agree.
Andor really did. I mean, Andor was so popular among super fans. I'm not sure if it like really broke out into the public the way Mandalorian did, but it was really, really good.
Yeah.
And maybe it will
Yep.
next time. But yeah, it's been
I hope
okay.
so. Yeah, Mandalorian or Andor has some of the lowest watching stats I think of any of the Star Wars shows, but it is the highest acclaimed critically by a lot, I think.
But the
So
fans
I hope that
love it, and it is great.
yeah, it's an excellent show.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's what I've been watching. The only other thing that I've been up to this week, I've been reading this book, The Bone Shard
A
War by
book, huh?
Andrea Stewart. Just need to shout this out. Comes out on April
Ooh.
18th. Um, it's so good. This is the third book in the trilogy, and it's an epic fantasy that's kind of reminiscent of like Avatar: The Last Airbender a little bit with some of the magic,
Cool.
some of the creatures. Um, really, really great book. But yeah, that's what I've been watching and reading this week.
Lovely.
Anything else we want to hit on?
I think not. I think let's go on to let them because we are burning daylight here. We're lasting a while because we're
We
having so
are.
much fun talking to each other and to all
It's
of you. The Wickedness Lightning
it's
Round, if you're
true.
new here, is where we take a bunch of stories we couldn't have time to get to in the main body of the show and give our 20-second opinions. No more,
Hmm?
technically, no less. So
We're
let's
very strict.
see what we got on here. Okay, I think I did actually arrange these, so you would answer ones that you might know better about, but I forget how I
Okay.
arranged them. Okay, I think you asked me first.
Okay. Um, so DreamWorks is getting the original cast of Shrek back together for Shrek 5.
Yeah, fun. I didn't realize how long ago the last Shrek movie was. It was like 2011 or something. So it's been a while. But yeah, it doesn't matter how old Eddie Murphy and Mike Myers get. They can still get in a booth and say Scottish accents and bray like a
Mhm.
donkey. Fine, sure, do it. Big green men. I might see it. I'm kind of over Shrek at this point. It's been years, but sounds fun.
I'm so
Okay,
tempted to bring it back around to Harry Potter because that's the same amount of time that has elapsed, but I will keep my peace.
you do that. All right. Daniel, a new trailer
Yes.
for the Marvel show Secret Invasion came out. It's Emilia Clarke. She's in it.
Yes.
Who she play?
So she is playing Gaia. So she is a Skrull, we now know. She is the daughter of the Skrull Talos.
Oh,
She's gonna have a really interesting arc floating back and forth between the radical villains of the season and the good guys because she's related to them. So Secret Invasion looks awesome. I'm really hopeful it's good, but we'll see. All right. And so speaking of new shows, Paramount
uh-huh.
Plus, they greenlit a new Star Trek show about Starfleet
Mm-hmm.
Academy.
So there's another one of those things where it's hard to get excited because there's just so much of it. They got Picard, they got Discovery, they got Lower Decks, they got Prodigy, they got this new one, Starfleet Academy, Strange New Worlds. I think Discovery and Picard are ending, so this will be a new one that's going to replace both of them. That's kind of nice. I'm not a giant Star Trek fan, but I'm glad if people are Star Trek fans out there and they're going to like this. Good for you.
Yeah.
All right, Daniel. Ben
Yes.
Affleck, former Batman actor, will appear in the Flash movie. He let slip that Wonder Woman is also in the Flash movie. Neat.
Yep. I mean, I saw someone point out that you can see her briefly in the trailer, so he kind of talked a little bit about what the scene is, so he definitely spoiled some stuff. But I feel like with these cameos, they're just getting spoiled ahead of releases so much now that I'm not even surprised. I'm just like, okay. I like that she's in the movie. I wish I could have her and not Ezra Miller. Then I'd be more excited for it.
A good talk, yeah.
All right. So Leo was asking about this one. This one is for you, Leo. Delaney Hales is going to be replacing Bailey Bass as Claudia in Interview with the Vampire season 2. Major recast.
So yeah, I loved the first season of that show. I thought it was great. Interview with the Vampire on AMC. It's never great news when there's a major recasting because it means like, I don't know, there's an unstable foundation. On the other hand, if I'm being honest, while I was watching it was like Bailey Bass was the weakest part of the show for me. I thought she was like good in some bits, but I didn't, especially with things, she didn't really do it for me. Maybe that's why they're recasting. I'm not sure why, but it could probably stand to have a better actor playing Claudia, to be honest with you.
Fair. It's a hard role.
All right. It is a very hard role. That's true. It is tricky. Am I alone there? Were you watching it and like, this show is so good? Yeah, she's doing her best.
I still haven't seen it yet. That is so I don't have an opinion on her quite yet.
Okay, I'd be curious. All right, Daniel.
Yes.
Only 37% of US viewers watched the first season of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, all the way through, compared to like 45% of European viewers.
Yep. So this came out in a huge new report from The Hollywood Reporter talking about the state of Amazon's streaming service. It's not great. Basically, they said 50% would have been considered solid, but not spectacular. And they broke the bank on this thing. But anytime it gets brought up that this show might be floundering, might not have been great, they push back and say it was a big success. So who can say?
Who can say?
You decide. All right. So Netflix announced that they are making a Scott Pilgrim anime and bringing back the entire original cast from the movie.
Well, call them Shrek 5 then. Sounds fun. Why not? Scott Pilgrim. I mean, I've seen it. I wasn't like there was like a good cult of the movie for a while. Like people were really into it for a few years. I liked it. I didn't like fall in love with it. Neat. How cool. Michael Cera, what's he been doing? This. And good for the cast and good for the fans. Yep. All right. That was Michael Cera, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, okay. I think it's one for me, but it's one to you. Disney fires Marvel executive Ike Perlmutter, who bought the studio, Marvel Studio, back in the 90s and had a big part in making it what it is today.
Yep, Ike Perlmutter, he bought Marvel when it was going bankrupt. Then he eventually sold it to Disney, I believe. And apparently he's been a giant thorn in the side of Kevin Feige and the Disney execs. So there's a lot of speculation of, was it his time or was this just an excuse because they're laying off people to get rid of him? Probably a bit of both. Seemed like they're saying he was obsolete, basically.
In way before
the position he was in.
Yeah. Also, you sound like kind of a dick. And that is our show. Well, he did when I was reading that. Thanks so much, everybody.
That is what the word is.
We are here every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. New York, where I was this past weekend, 1 p.m. Mountain, and noon on the West Coast. On the Facebook page when it's coming, on the when it's coming YouTube page. We're also available in podcast form. Download whenever you get your podcasts, be it iTunes, Google Play, or elsewhere. Leave us a like, leave us a comment. The comments were great this episode. Thank you for being so communicative, conversational.
Thank you for hanging out.
Chat with us. We're always here. We have a good time. So thanks for watching. See you next time. And Julie Davies, just thank you for getting up that early. You don't have to, but we definitely appreciate
yes, we do.
The viewership of all of you. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everybody. Bye.